The What to Read Next podcast helps you build a TBR of future favorite books. In each episode, Lori and Maine interviews authors and book influencers to recommend books they loved for you to pick up today. If you're an avid reader, always looking for your next great read, then the show's for you. Hannah, welcome to What to Read Next podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me back.
So happy to have you back. Tell us what you've been up to in the past 3 years, actually.
3 years, wow. So kind of a wild couple of years, as I think they were for all of us. But I started writing this book, Meant to Be Mine, in April 2020. And it really got me through the pandemic. It was the thing that I was most excited for, sort of the only thing that I was excited for. And, I was missing things like travel and going to see live music and wearing pants that weren't sweatpants and hugging my grandparents. And so all of these things I poured into the book. So there's a lot of travel in the book, and Edie, my main character, is a stylist, and she has a really close relationship with her grandma, and she's dating a musician. And so all of these things, it was my way to sort of have a life outside of my little living space. So
I remember following you. I've been following you on Insta for a long time, but I remember following you through this journey because you've been documenting the writing of this process, not telling. And I was like eager to know what was the secret pandemic project that was getting you through it. So now it feels full circle to a couple years later to get it in my hands and read it and be like, oh my gosh, it's like the New York that we were dreaming at that time, because New York in April 2020 was very different than New York 2019 or even 2022.
Yeah. And my editor and I had a lot of conversations where I was like, do I put a mask in this scene? Or like, can we have a concert in 2022? And we were just sort of like making predictions. And I was like, well, I think New York might be like this. And she was like, or it could be like this. So yeah, there was a lot of uncertainty, but I'm glad with the balance we struck, where it's mostly normal life, but there is a reference to the pandemic being something in the past. And thank you for following along. I love sharing little snippets of behind the scenes on my Instagram. So
yeah, that's a nice little plug, and then like you're writing book 5, or you finished book 5 last summer, which is you've written longhand and we're in Maine. So I don't know what it looks like, but I'm just curious. It feels like your books are like a snapshot of like your life, not the place where you were writing your life. So
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it feels really special to me to be able to, pull places that I love and things that I love into what I write. So I think all writers do that. Like there's little snippets of, everything we love.
Yeah. So let's chat about Meant to Be Mine. Tell us the elevator pitch.
Sure. So Meant to Be Mine follows the story of Edie Meyer, who is 29 years old, and she is a stylist living in Brooklyn. And she comes from this really tight-knit, sort of eccentric, funny Jewish family. And the matriarch of the family, Gloria, has a special power where she can predict the day that every member of her family is going to meet the love of their life. And she's predicted it accurately for 3 generations. She predicted her own marriage and then her children and now Edie's generation. And so the book opens on the day that Edie is flying to Maine to surprise her sister, who is going to be engaged that day. Her boyfriend's going to propose, and it's Edie's day, and she is going to meet the love of her life. And what happens next is not what Edie expected. And after a tragedy and after a surprise revelation, Edie has some really difficult choices to make.
Yeah, and it questions the whole idea of soulmates, fate, and you have plans and God laughs at you, like the idea is like, I have it all planned out, and it's like reality is like, nope, not at all.
Yeah.
And so it's a great exploration about that. It's great. It's like a great, it has twists and turns that you think it's going to go one way, but the reality is like it's a completely different way.
Yeah. And that's something I don't know if I consciously did this at the time, but, I started writing this April 2020, and everything that we thought we knew about life was really upended. And we just didn't really have control over so much. And I think that's probably why I really was excited to explore this idea of like, if you did know how this one aspect of your life was unquestionably going to turn out, you are going to meet this person on this day, how would that change your life? And so that's where Edie's story came from.
Yeah. Oh, so good. So people should just buy it and just enjoy and read it and just be amazed and go blind, because whatever you think it expected, it may or may not happen. So,
None of us know.
none of us know. So let's chat about some of your writing process. Like you've been writing your books, along with having a day job, and you've been documenting this writing process for at least in social media for the past couple of years. Tell us about what's the power of documenting and also some of the new techniques and new ideas that you have to uncover recently.
Yeah, sure. So I've always tracked my own writing in a way. So just in a private spreadsheet, just how many words I wrote every day and what the total word count was. And I started doing that because it made me feel productive. There was something really nice to see the numbers just ticking up and up and up. And writing a whole novel, I mean, the first time I did it, it was, of course, the longest thing I had ever tried to write. And so seeing that motivation was really powerful and really helpful. And then I remember I was finishing up my second book, Love at First Like. I had like 6 weeks left to the deadline, and I was looking at my spreadsheet and I was like, I'm not going to make it. Like, there just are not enough days for me to write this many words. And so I decided right then and there, I'm going to post my word count, how many words I wrote in the like 90 minutes that I was just like banging things out on the Amtrak between Boston and New York. I remember this so well. And I posted how many words I wrote, and I committed to doing that for every single session of writing forward. And I've done that. And seeing the numbers publicly just holds me accountable in a totally different way. And it's sort of become this whole other thing because now other writers are doing it too and sharing their own word counts on Instagram, which is so cool. And I think it's a really good way for me to showcase what it's really like to write a book behind the scenes. It's not just like always glamorous or like easy. And so every day, in addition to posting my account, I also post a little bit about, what that writing session was like what was really hard. What am I sort of trying to figure out? What did I learn? What sort of tips do I have? And so that's become a really, I think, nice part of my process. The other thing that I just started doing last summer is writing longhand in a notebook. And anybody who knows me knows that I'm a massive fan of Ellen Hildebrand. I think that she is the absolute queen. If you haven't read her books, please go run out and buy them right now. My favorite is 28 Summers. And she has this incredible life. She is very prolific and fabulous. And she writes longhand by her pool on Nantucket. She writes longhand on the beach where she goes to St. John in the British Virgin Islands every winter. And she's just always outside and sunbathing and writing. And I was like, that's incredibly glamorous. How can I do that? And I was like, well, my laptop, there's a glare from the sun. It's not good. And so I just started writing in a plain spiral bound notebook. It's nothing fancy. And I decided I really liked it. There's something I think very different about the way that your hand moves over the page and connects to your brain. Because you can't really delete anything and there's no cursor staring back at you. You just sort of have to go for it and you write something down and it's just there and you just have to keep moving. So there's really no room for you to have that sort of self-conscious moment of doubt where you're like, is this line good? Is this working? So yeah, I've been doing that since last summer. I did it all last summer. I wrote 90,000 words that way. And once a week or so, I would just type up everything that I had written and then go back and edit once it's done. And so I'm going to do that going forward just because it was productive and efficient, but also I really enjoyed it. It made the process of writing that book the most fun I've ever had writing a book because I could be outside, I could be in nature, I could be anywhere that I wanted to be. I would go to a restaurant or bar. So yeah, I didn't feel so tethered to my laptop in my living room.
I love this. Yeah, I love the idea of long write. I journal every day, and so sometimes I do scripting and just do the writing, and it's such an amazing process. There's something to be said about pen and paper that you don't get that magic when you're on the computer. You're there's you just do a brain dump, and you don't know what's gonna happen. You just uncovering as you write it, but there's some magic that happens. Pen and paper.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm an outline girl. So I know what I'm going to write, but I just don't know how I'm going to write it. And so that's the fun part.
I love this. All right. So let's chat some book recommendations. Do you have any books you recommend our listeners to pick up?
Oh my God. So many. Rom-coms specifically or anything?
Anything. It's up to you.
Okay. So I'll just go with the books that I'm reading right now or just finished and loved. I just started listening to the audiobook of Jessica Simpson's memoir, Open Book, and everybody told me you have to listen to it on audio. You can't like physically read it. And they were so right, because not only is it an incredibly powerful story, she talks about her decision to stop drinking. She talks about the abuse that she faced as a child, a lot of other issues that she's faced in her life and overcome. But she's such a powerful storyteller, and hearing her voice just brings it to life in a totally new way. So I'm really enjoying that. I'm listening to it on Scribd. And then I just finished Pachinko by Min Jin Lee, and I'm like the last person on earth to read it. But I saw like a snippet of the show on Apple Plus TV, Apple TV Plus, whatever it's called. And my mom has been raving about the book for years. And so I read it finally, and I was like, it's just this like epic historical fiction family saga. And so you get to know 3 generations of Koreans who are living in Japan during a very difficult time in history. And it was just so stunningly written. And then if I have time for one more recommendation.
Yeah, go for it.
There's this book coming out, I believe in July, called Schmutz by Felicia Berliner. And it's just, I think if you liked Unorthodox on Netflix, you would love this, because it's about an 18-year-old Hasidic woman living in Brooklyn who is afraid of getting married because she secretly has an addiction to porn. And it's such a unique book because so much of it is actually written in Yiddish. So I got some of it, but I think if you don't understand Yiddish, of course, like there's a glossary and like you do pick it up because there are so many context clues, but it really felt like traveling to a different world, even though her world is like literally 15 blocks from mine, but it transports you into a totally different universe.
Oh my God, that sounds so good. It sounds so good and immersive, like I love reading books that are like where it features the culture, features languages, features like you're just like immersed in a world that you're just trying to figure it out, So, so good. So Hannah, tell us where we can find you online.
Sure. So on Instagram, I'm at Hannah Orens, HANNAHORENS. Couldn't get my full name one day. And then I'm also that on Twitter. And then on TikTok, I'm Hannah.Orens.
Thank you, Hannah, for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Such a pleasure.
If you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to share with friends, subscribe, rate, and review the show. This is the easiest way to support the podcast. For a list of books mentioned and other romance recommendations, please visit watchrenextblog.com. Did you know you can purchase audiobooks directly from your favorite local bookstore? With Libra.fm, you can pick up more than 250,000 audiobooks, including bestsellers and recommendations from real booksellers. You'll get the same audiobooks at the same price as the largest audiobook company, you know the name, but you'll be part of a different story, one that supports the local community. If you're new to audiobooks, they're the perfect way to squeeze more reading into your busy life. Listen with the free Libra.fm app while you do your chores, walk the dog, relax at home. If you already love audiobooks and don't know what to listen next, check out recommendations from people who know the best booksellers. The Watch Read Next podcast has a special offer for our listeners. Get 2 audiobooks on Libra.fm for the price of 1 with your first month membership. Use code WatchReadNext. The offer is valid only for new members in Canada and the US. The Watch Read Next podcast is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Please visit frolic.media/podcast to discover new shows to tune in. Thank you so much for listening and have a great day.